Intergovernmental and Public Transportation Committee, Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. Call to order. And Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Ms. Simon. Here. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
He's here.
Okay. Mr. Schron.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Is there public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Lou.
Lou, welcome. What is happening?
Dale, can't figure out.
Shh, we're going to have, Lou, just wait a second until we're all good.
I apologize, I couldn't turn it off.
Technical difficulty is something we all experience.
Get a grandchild. Grandchild they'll fix it.
Lou, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, glad to see everybody, but unfortunately, the grandchildren of Mr. Millers are not here to help out. So I'm so glad to come here again. In general, I'm here to support our Inspector General office. But today, I'm very happy and even more excited because finally, the county, we can do something about our transportation. And myself, tomorrow, I will be down in State House, the Ohio State House in Columbus. Even that's mainly for Health and Human Services, but I would like to say the same thing. Our Health and Human Services do need a good transportation systems and the transportation service, especially the public ones, to support. And here we have been experiencing a very bad funding issues because we do not get a fair redistribution from the State House. So I hope our new plan can really show them that not only is the needs for us, it's always a communal benefits. It will also benefit the State House people there as well. Basically, the whole Ohio, our whole transportation system has been only relying mostly on cars, which is not very helpful because there are cars can do, there are things cars cannot do. So having a public transportation actually is beneficial for us. It's just lots of people, they don't think about it. So I think in our plan, I think we should also pay attention to public education to let people know you already pay for it from your sales tax. Why not enjoy it? Why not support it? Because it's good for everybody's health, good for the environment. Even you don't believe in global warming, but at least you want to be able to go to places without getting traffic jam, right? You want a good traveling experience, even just to come to downtown to see the games. Do you really like to drive on the roads with all the potholes? That damages your car too. However, instead of spending lots of money to keep maintaining the roads and bridges, if we promote our public transportation, it actually will balance lots of things out to make taxpayers' money wisely spent and to help all the people thrive in the area. So I'm so glad we will have this conversation here, and I wish we can do more of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Louis. We always appreciate your advocacy. Approval of the minutes for January 31st, 2023, please. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. The minutes have been approved. There's no matters referred to the committee. However, what we have is a presentation of the overview of a transportation plan that has been a cornerstone, I believe, of the executive's leadership and his focus on how he's going to govern. And who we have here today is Chief Annie Pease, the Senior Advisor for Transportation. They asked, and I said, okay, to be able to share the vision of the executive through the awesome hands of the chief, and we're all ears, and if you don't mind, we'll ask some questions after. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much to the chair and to the committee for having me here today. I appreciate the introduction. My name is Annie Pease. I'm the Senior Advisor on Transportation for Cuyahoga County. I'm here today to provide an overview of the new administration's vision for transportation countywide. I am new to this position at the county. I just began at the beginning of March. Prior to being here at the county, I was working for the city of Cleveland. I worked on the implementation side of infrastructure projects, and I also helped operationalize the 2022 Complete and Green Streets Ordinance, which was a major transportation priority for Mayor Bibb. Prior to working for the city, I worked for University Circle Incorporated as transportation director. My husband and I landed in Ohio City in Cleveland about 7 years ago. And so in that time, we have been users of Cuyahoga County's transportation system. And I wanted to take a moment before I dive into my presentation to talk a little bit about that. Transportation, my interest and my passion in this field is really centered in the fact that transportation is all about people. And when we talk about transportation systems, we sometimes say that the best transportation systems work for people who are 8, as you can see on that image on the left, and for people who are 80. And if those transportation systems can work for people who are 8 and also people who are 80, they'll also work really well for all of us in between those two ends of the age spectrum. The image on the right, my dad would be horrified to know that I'm using his picture to represent someone who's 80 because he's in his 70s. But this photo was taken about a year ago. My mom had a traumatic fall, unfortunately, at home, and she was recovering in a skilled nursing facility. This day was in February. The snow was piled high, and it was the type of day that neither my dad or I could use our car and drive safely to visit her in the skilled nursing facility. So we were able to walk a few blocks, and we took the bus, we took RTA, and we were able to spend time with her that day and care for her. And that was an example of our transportation system as a whole working for people in their 70s who are experiencing the normal life and things that come along with being 70 years old. That's a good example. The new administration's vision for Cuyahoga County's transportation system is that it's working for people at different stages of life, experiencing different facets and needs of our transportation system. So throughout my presentation today, I'm going to start with a focus on why the administration is interested in transportation. Among the many purviews of the county, why this topic is so important. I'll then talk about a few initiatives that are already underway that relate to this vision. And I'll conclude with the systems approach and how we can approach transportation not through a tunnel, but really comprehensively and address these broader needs that we experience across the county. And I will have time at the end for questions and discussion. And I'm also hoping that this presentation is an introduction, yes, to this role and this work, but I also hope it's an introduction to working with members of this committee and the council at large. This vision will never happen with one group independently working towards this larger goals. We really hope that we build this together. And I want to make sure, it's my responsibility to make sure that how we move forward represents the needs of the county countywide. And I'll need your help to do that. So some framing on why transportation. I have a snippet here from the Cuyahoga County Charter. This is a document that I've been making myself more familiar with, being new to Cuyahoga County. But the very first sentence of Cuyahoga County's charter reads that we, the people of Cuyahoga County, Ohio, desire a reformed county government to significantly improve the county's economic competitiveness. So right from the start, a major charge of the role of Cuyahoga County is economic competitiveness. I'm going to circle to how transportation connects to that very first sentence of the charter. So when we talk about transportation, the first thing that pops into many people's minds are engines and motors and the nuts and bolts of how cars might work or a train. But really at its core, and as I mentioned in the beginning, transportation is about mobility. And a transportation system focused on mobility, one that is connected, healthy, and sustainable, is key to unlocking economic opportunities for residents of Cuyahoga County. I'm using this term mobility, and mobility is one of those words with lots of different meanings. On the one sense, mobility is about the ability of a person to transport themselves, to move, and to get from A to B. When we're thinking countywide about where those needs are, where people need to go, we need to look no further than the county logo. This helps us understand where we need to prioritize because there are so many places. But people, for better outcomes, need to be able to access things like parks and green space, jobs and educational opportunities, healthcare and daily amenities like grocery stores, banks, post office. So a certain side of mobility is being able to reach these places, and with the plethora of options and choices people have, as a county, we do have to focus and prioritize where people need to go. So this is about where to go. The other side of mobility are the options available to people to make those connections. We're lucky in that Cuyahoga County is a place rich with choice. Many, although not all of our communities are walkable. As you can see, the image on the left is the Van Aken district. The most widespread transport option available is driving, allowing people to cover vast distances in shorter amounts of time. The Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, as well as Akron Metro and Lake Tran, all provide public transportation services, either in or to Cuyahoga County. Additionally, our expanding network of greenways and bicycle paths across the county, as well as increasing number of bicycles on the market, like electric bikes, as well as shared e-scooters or e-bikes, are making biking or using those shared mobility devices another viable option for many Cuyahogans. So we've talked so far about where to go and how to get there. Another critical aspect of transportation across the county is land use. As you can see on this slide, you may be familiar, that map on the left shows the population of Cuyahoga County in 1948 and where the population was concentrated at the time. You can see the population in 1950 was about 1.4 million people. Fast forward 50 years later, the population of Cuyahoga County is still about 1.4 million people, but the red on that map shows where people are living. So the population has dispersed wider across the county without drastically increasing the total number of people living in Cuyahoga County. So this means that people are needing to travel further distances to reach places. And it's important to keep this map in the back of our minds. I think when we're talking about transportation, we're gonna talk about walking, we're gonna talk about public transport, we're gonna talk about bikes, we'll talk about cars, and the movement of goods and services. All of these aspects are important parts of our transportation network, but understanding that we do need to travel vast distances and where we no longer have a network where our jobs are located along the Cuyahoga River banks or along Lake Erie, and most people are living in Tremont or Slavic Village or somewhere near the river valley. Where people live and where jobs are located have changed over time. And therefore, the way that we transport ourselves and the way our system works also has to adapt to a changing environment. We should neither go back in time and try to recreate the past, but we need to understand the past so that we can look forward in a way that we're staying connected and helping people reach economic opportunity.
Breathe.
Appreciate that. The maps on this slide, another map of Cuyahoga County. The map on the left shows median household income. The areas shaded in darker red show areas where there's higher incomes. The areas shaded lighter have lower incomes. The boundary are census tracts. The map on the right, again, same geography, but different data. The map on the right shows where jobs are located across the county. Darker areas of red have higher concentrations of jobs. Lighter shaded areas have lower concentrations of jobs. And as we're thinking about this charge of the county to be economically competitiveness, especially as government agencies, we deeply need to consider those in need of economic mobility. and those needing to rise up the economic ladder. And as we can see, jobs are one aspect of the way that people can move up the economic ladder. And as we can see on this map, many of the job centers are located in areas where people already have higher incomes. They're also spread out a little bit across Cuyahoga County. They're not all located in the same place. So critical to thinking about how people are reaching economic opportunities, getting access to jobs, they have to be able to get there. We could recreate this map and look at other indicators like parks and green spaces, universities, or other areas of educational attainment. And we'd see similar things, where people are located and where these assets are. It's very important to understand where these assets are located now, consider connections if they're not already there, to have multiple ways for people to access these amenities. Come up with creative solutions and think about how we can really meet those needs and help people reach these opportunities. And as we're thinking about new amenities coming into Cuyahoga, thinking about locating them in areas that are already connected, and creating a more connected Cuyahoga County when we have the opportunity to do so. I'll pivot now and talk about a few of the county initiatives that are related. All of these initiatives relate to creating a connected Cuyahoga County. It's not an exhaustive list, but I do want to point these out because it's important. Much of this work is underway. And in my next slide, I'll talk about how these initiatives fit into a larger systems framework. The first initiative I'll point out is the Cuyahoga Greenways Plan. This plan lays out a network of connected bikeways and greenways countywide. The image in the top middle is the Transit-Oriented Development Plan. This plan lays out corridors across the county with high-frequency transit and identifies areas where policy and infrastructure changes would increase the number of people with access to countywide amenities. On the top right, we have the County Lakefront Access Plan, and this plan has identified 4 priority projects that would make Lake Erie more accessible to more people who live all across Cuyahoga County. The Shared Mobility Network Expansion Plan is there on the bottom left, and this is a plan that organizes those shared mobility devices like shared e-scooters and e-bikes, organize the parking locations. The goal of this is to make that program more accessible to more people, while also keeping the public right-of-way organized and safe for everyone using the streets. The last is the Workforce Transportation Pilot Project. You may have heard recently about a pilot to connect workers from a transit line in Solon out to workplaces. The county going forward, we're both supporting the Solon pilot and also looking to support additional pilot areas and new locations to connect more workers to businesses that aren't currently located in walkable proximity to existing transit service. So a systems approach. I think it's important, and I think as a community and as a society, we've come around on the importance of thinking about systems. When we think about someone being healthy, we no longer believe that just going to a doctor makes a person healthy. Being healthy is about being connected to a broader system that encourages health. If we want people to bike, we don't build a bike lane and think that everyone is going to start biking because a bike lane exists. All important change has to happen across a system, and you need multiple pieces to plug in and provide support to achieve better outcomes. Transportation is no different. It's not about just looking. We can't just provide transit. We can't just provide roads. We can't just accommodate trucks. We really have to think about how the whole system works and think about how all of these pieces come together. So going forward, we're considering 3 focus areas for a systems approach to transportation. The first is around infrastructure. in supporting the advancement of multimodal projects that help connect people by multiple modes of transportation to amenities. Priority infrastructure projects would be those identified in county-led studies, like the Lakefront Access Plan, like the Cuyahoga Greenway Plan, like Transit-Oriented Development Plan, or other projects that are connecting people to things like job centers, parks and green space, educational opportunities, and daily amenities. On the services side, our priority is supporting expanding multimodal transportation services in Cuyahoga County. This includes things like last mile connections between transit lines and job centers, expanding Amtrak service in Cuyahoga County, supporting senior transportation services, whether it's through public transit, RTA's paratransit program, or other dedicated senior transit service providers. And then critical among all of the service-related work we'll do is supporting public transit in Cuyahoga County, supporting RTA, identifying opportunities at the state level and at the federal level to ensure that RTA has the funding it needs to provide the critical lifeline that is public transit countywide. From a policy perspective, our focus will be policies that create a healthier, more connected, and economically viable Cuyahoga County. We'll be looking at developing a county-wide transit-oriented development implementation strategy in partnership with our communities, and developing policies that encourage new housing and job centers to locate in connected areas already. I will conclude by mentioning that this type of work never should happen in a vacuum. It will never be successful if approached unilaterally. So a number of key partners to fulfill this work are identified on this slide. In addition to the appropriate departments across the county and county council, we'll rely on partnering with the 59 communities across Cuyahoga County, our service providers like the RTA, and specialized transportation service providers, whether it's senior transportation or a shared mobility company. Other agencies like our Metropolitan Planning Organization, NOACA, the Ohio Department of Transportation, the Cleveland Metro Parks, and groups like Team NEO, and thinking about economic development. And then community groups are often on the front lines of understanding the user's perspective and using our transportation network. So local community development corporations and transportation advocacy organizations will be extremely important partners going forward. So with that, I'll conclude the content of my presentation, and I very much welcome your questions and a robust discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Your excitement for your job is very evident, and we're excited that you are here. And the one thing that I'm appreciative that the city of Cleveland did franchise you, and we were able to acquire your talents and services to help make the vision of the county executives a reality. So I'll just open up for my colleagues, and then I'll jump in at the very end if that's all right with my fellow council members. Is that good? Councilman Miller?
So, thank you very much for your presentation, and I also commend your enthusiasm, and I'm excited about this program, and that we're trying to look at transportation in a comprehensive way. It's one of the core elements, along with healthcare, housing, education, workforce, and a few other things that are the basic determinants of economic and social well-being in any community. And my first question is whether you're going to be leading this by yourself, or whether you're going to have some additional staff around you that's going to form a small department that's going to run this program.
Thank you, Councilman. So our objective is to build out a department or a division within the county to focus on transportation. There would be a staff. But our near-term goal is to put some more meat on the bones behind the infrastructure priorities, the service priorities, the policy priorities, to ensure that the team that we build to support this work aligns with the vision. We establish goals and metrics, and that we're working hand in glove with the other existing divisions throughout the county.
And is this going to be a standalone department as opposed to being a division within an existing department?
We haven't decided that level of detail yet on specifically what the structure of the department would look like, whether it would be standalone or located within another.
Okay, so that covers the easy questions, and I'm going to apologize for the difficult question that I'm going to put forward now. And my question is to what extent do you envision these policies involving the need for new money, and how much new money do you think is going to be required over what time frame, and where do you think that might come from? I know this is a difficult question, but as the chairman of Finance and Budget, I get to ask this question.
I appreciate that question, and it is really important. At this stage, we want to socialize the objectives of the infrastructure, the services, the policies, ensure we're on the right track. We're currently exploring some options for funding that would apply to infrastructure projects, which may look different to a policy agenda, which may look different from a service agenda. So we're exploring what some of those funding sources might be. But as we put more meat on the bones, as we confirm that our direction is right, and we have better vision on whether this is a standalone department or a division within another department, we'd like to come back and have that conversation with the committee, the Finance Committee, this committee, and the others, to talk more about that and better understand what the best sources are.
So, thanks for that, but don't leave us totally in the dark. Give us somewhat of a clue. What are some of the kind of options that you're looking at?
I don't have an answer to that at this moment in time. I would like to come back and in earnest, this work, our objective is to not get ahead of council or any necessary committees. I would like to come back and share that information.
So I'm going to make a very broad statement, and I said the exact same thing to Executive Ronayne and Chief of Staff Wobser, and also to Katie Gallagher when I met with her. And what I'm going to tell you is that administrations often have this habit of working behind the scenes for months and putting some proposal together, and after they've studied it and carefully researched it and given it a lot of thought, then they come to council and say, well, we have this idea and we've given it a whole lot of thought, and it's well thought out and carefully researched, and we'd like you to pass it the week after next. And so I'm saying, please don't do that. I would much prefer if you would come to us and say, we're thinking about doing some things along the lines of such and such, and and we think it might cost somewhere in the realm of X amount, and we think this is something like how we might do it, but it's not all worked out. What suggestions do you have, and what comments do you have, so that we can participate in the development as opposed to just getting to vote yes or no at the end of the process. So I just put that out there for your consideration.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. How long you been here?
I started on March 6th.
March 6th,
Yep.
so that's 2 weeks-ish. And federal appropriations and the transportation budget from the state, now those are all going to be eligible, but it's all different timings. And I know you'll submerge yourself in there, and as much funding that's out there, you're going to retrieve it, and you're going to use that to help catapult this even further than it is already. Councilwoman Simon, and then Councilman Schron.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Have a question. You spoke of socializing the objectives of infrastructure. Can you please elaborate and explain what that is?
We want to socialize the focus areas for transportation.
What does that mean, socialize?
Share them with council, share them with other members, other departments, other staff across the county, our partner agencies.
You want to communicate these ideas? Is that what you mean
Yes.
by socializing
Yes.
concepts?
And ensure that the focus area around infrastructure, services, and policies is adding to a transportation agenda locally, not replicating or duplicating existing efforts.
So considering the Planning Commission has spent a great deal of time and resources on the TOD and green planning and green space plan, frankly, what is your role going to be, and what do you add in terms of not duplicating that effort?
It's a fantastic question. So a lot of the work that's happening now, the Cuyahoga Greenways Plan lays out a network, and it's lines on a map, right, at this point, and it helps guide our infrastructure priorities, both the county's infrastructure priorities as well as communities, specific communities across Cuyahoga County. Where one example of where we could add value relative to the Greenways Plan is thinking about how to take those projects a little bit further so that they're easier to implement. Doing a little bit more engineering or doing a little bit more study to ensure that those lines on a map are feasible helps align them to our partner agencies, the community's capital planning, as well as the county's own capital planning. The TOD work is a little bit different, and it touches different departments where you have a plan that lays out, we know where the high-frequency transit corridors are. We know what the zoning around those corridors look like. And so it's work between County Planning Commission and our Department of Development, as well as Public Works, and thinking about the incentives we're providing, the zoning that our municipalities are responsible for, and strategizing on how to implement the recommendations of those plans. They don't all squarely fit perfectly between county planning and public works, or county planning and the Department of Development. So a lot of it is strategizing and implementation and carrying these things forward.
We have NOACA, we have RTA, we have Planning Commission, we have Rails to Trails. We have so many different agencies doing this work. Is it your position that your job, your role is going to be to try to coordinate the coordinating agency that's already in place to do the same? I mean, NOACA is there to coordinate, right? Are you coming in to duplicate what NOACA should be doing or isn't doing enough? I'm not clear.
Not at all. So the objective of sharing the priorities around infrastructure or services is ensuring that this work wouldn't duplicate work that NOACA or that RTA does themselves, which we're aware of a number of those things now, but it's important that we communicate that out so that we can really carry it forward in partnership. Like NOACA, for example, they don't have an implementation arm for their projects. They're a planning agency and a funding agency, but they don't implement projects inside municipalities. They lean on local governments like the county or one of our communities to execute projects.
So what we'll expect from you is that your job essentially is to go into communities, the 59, and help them implement programs?
It would really depend on the type of project that we're talking about. So when we're talking about the Greenway Plan, those would lean more on a specific infrastructure or a capital project. But when we're talking about the transit-oriented development plan, for example, that could be a zoning change.
But the planning commission's going through the whole zoning change with the communities now. You're aware of that, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're aggressively, this is a priority. The planning commission is to go into communities and help them up there and modernize their zoning.
Yes.
To coordinate with the TOD and their other efforts together. So what will you be doing differently?
While planning would focus on the zoning, there could be infrastructure projects that would support both a physical development project as well as a change in the public right-of-way. So that we wouldn't, if once the zoning changes, there's an opportunity for development, the county has a role in the development as well. So specifically related to TOD, I'd be working closely with planning and development and the local communities, but it's one step. But again, the TOD plan would just be one example of a number of existing plans and initiatives that we'd be looking at.
Thank you. I know you've only been here a couple weeks, but you spoke of building up this department. That's an expectation, and you anticipate bringing people on. When we already have the Planning Commission, NOACA, all these other partnerships that are aggressively, RTA, where would this funding come from, and why do you think we would need to add more people to this already, quite frankly, populated space?
So where the funding comes from is still a question that we have to answer. But I think there is space within the county. Currently, the city of Cleveland, for example, doesn't have a Department of Transportation. None of our other municipalities across Cuyahoga County doesn't have a Department of Transportation. Cuyahoga County hasn't had a Department of Transportation. NOACA is a planning agency for a 5-county region. We really don't have a local strategy around transportation for the county. This is an example. Lots of peer cities, the city of Pittsburgh, city of Detroit, areas where there's good coordination between major cities and counties, there is a local Department of Transportation, and that hasn't existed in Cleveland or in Cuyahoga County. And so we are looking to add capacity in that space, lay out these objectives that we have for Cuyahoga County, and determine the best path. We don't want to staff up. We don't want to request funds without knowing that we're on the right path. And so we do want to talk through this with the local partners who exist in that space, but ensure that our efforts are adding value and positioning the county to move forward on a better vision for transportation.
Okay, I appreciate all that, but I want to point out we have a pretty robust sustainability department that's been very involved with transportation. So when I hear that we're not locally doing this work, I object to, I take issue with that. I think our Department of Sustainability has been very aggressive, and because it's not called the Department of Transportation doesn't mean that's not the place that work is being done. And so you're going to be reporting directly to the executive? We've talked a lot about reporting today, so I'll ask you, is that who you'll be reporting to?
Currently, I report to the Chief of Staff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you for those answers to your question. Councilman Tron?
You're probably going to find a similar path of questions because Councilman Miller, I think, is waving a red flag, or not waving a flag, not a red flag, but a flag that says, hey, I'm concerned about funding and financing. And my councilman colleague, Ms. Simon, is also saying, wait a minute, we've got all these other support groups. To me, when this happens and you want to put on another one, usually you see some consolidation, some merger, and some opportunities like it was done with GCP and things of that nature. If we're talking about that, that's one thing, but we don't have a bus system in the county that we're responsible for. I don't believe. We're not responsible for the rail system. We do have public works, but that's only the roads that we have responsibility for, it looks as though we're trying to expand into a whole bunch of other people's turf that they're doing some pretty good stuff with already. And we're telling them we're going to be the ones who are going to run transportation, and we're bringing nothing to the table other than maybe some money in regards to that and some expertise. When I looked at 2 maps you shared, being somebody whose entire district is has red all over it, I see nothing on this map as far as a service provider or an option even being discussed. So I'm just talking about from my own constituency. It looks like it's red all around the outside of the county as far as the census population, but very little in the way of transportation. Now, maybe they won't use it. I have no idea. That's a different question. Is there a program and plan to use transportation the way the young people are using it, which is none of these systems? It's an Uber, it's a Lyft, it's all those. Is that being considered as a conversation as part of our transportation system?
So the question is on, are we considering things like ride hailing, using
Yeah,
apps?
all the things that anybody below
Rides on
35
demand.
is using every single weekend, probably every single day.
Absolutely. That is newer technology that exists. It serves certain types of trips, certain types of users. It certainly has a space within our transportation system. And as we think about people needing different options to make those different types of trips, it is an important part of the system as a whole, but one piece of the larger system.
But would you agree that that's probably the most popular piece for probably people below 35 years old? As
Right.
far as transportation, other than their own private car?
There's a lot of different ways we could look at preferences for different types of modes. In terms of total number of trips, it's still a relatively small number of trips, but popular because it's a newer technology and kind of
You
replacing
say newer,
it.
it's been around for at least 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know if it's in the services piece in your discussion right now. So if we go to your service documents, we would find a discussion about those?
We currently, that's not one of the areas of focus that we've had that the county's been working on, like relative to the shared mobility, for example, is organizing shared e-scooters and shared bikes. Really, the county's role would be ensuring that there's an option for ride-hailing services, but our network of roads and pedestrian infrastructure enables an independent company like Uber or Lyft to come in and provide services like that for Cuyahoogans.
Yeah, but there's an awful lot of communities that are looking at that as being that last mile, which is the hardest one a lot of times to fill, and it's being filled by commercial. I mean, when you're talking about the scooters, that's really just a Lyft without a driver. It's really an Uber without a driver, theoretically. You can punch all that same kind of information in there. I just want to make sure that we're not leaving that out because it would look to me, if I'm somebody wanting to move to this community, if we've left that out of the planning process, it seems to me we'd be on the forefront of planning as opposed to reaction to it. So I would encourage you very much to look at that. From a budgeting standpoint, I know that Mr. Miller will be watching that very carefully, as I sit on that same committee, and as I know, my colleague, Ms. Simon, is not a big fan of duplication of services, nor am I. It seems like there appears to me to be an awful lot of duplication, and I'd hate to see this, and I'll be quite frank, that this is a political promise as opposed to a need that needs to be serviced when we already have so many good quality organizations that are working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm excited about it, and a centralized point person is something that I'm supportive of, to put everything together. Just a couple of questions through your presentation. The one map with the population here, and then in 1940 and 2000, did our green space grow? I can't really tell on the map.
Anecdotally, I think the green space has grown. There's been a big push for conservation. It wasn't my focus when I was looking at those maps, so I can't say for sure. But there has been a big focus on conserving green space within the county in the same time period.
And then with the first sentence, with the county charter, economic development was how it ended. Can you tell me how this is going to produce economic development results if it's materializes as you have shared?
I appreciate that. Yes. In a large part, and given a lot of the work that the county is doing in this space currently and that we'd like to expand, is really helping more people reach jobs. And so that example of the Solon pilot supporting RTA services, looking at creative solutions for first mile, last mile connections, really helping people reach jobs will be a major portion, and thinking about those in need of economic mobility, those in the lighter shaded areas on that map, and how our existing network is serving or could better serve those populations is really important. That would be the most traditional form of economic mobility. But what we've also learned, and I think there's been a great civic discussion around recently, are things like connecting people to the lakefront, connecting people to parks and green space is essential for health and wellness, which plays into quality of life and people's ability to participate in the economy. So again, from a systems perspective, focusing on connecting people to parks and green space, jobs and educational opportunities, as well as daily amenities. All of those will be critical to building the economy, helping people achieve higher economic mobility personally, and building Cuyahoga County's economic competitiveness at scale.
Yeah, and that's where I was going at the very end. Economic development, when a business is deciding where to go, they have a circle there, and they put a pin here, and every factor is in play while they calculate their decision. Where are we at right now in regards to attractiveness, and once we get to where you want to be, how much more of an attraction it will be? Can you talk about that briefly?
That's a great question. And part of what we'll do as we put more meat on this bones around this framework would be to establish some metrics and goals. And so looking at how to best measure where we are on some of those metrics, I would lean on our economic development department, for example, around competitiveness and our partners with Team NEO. From a sustainability perspective, lean on our Office of Sustainability on some of our emissions related targets. But bring those pieces together and then think about how this system as a whole, as we make these changes, how we can move the needle on those things. And I think that's really where the value of having a dedicated focus on transportation brings what's currently disparate pieces into a more singular initiative, and demonstrate that because of this push around transportation and connectivity is helping us move the needle. So that would be information we'd have forthcoming, specifically on where are we now, where do we want to go, and how can these interventions help us get there?
Yeah, just from my
Absolutely.
up here, we were kind of poor. We're getting a little bit better, and hopefully we can get a lot better and make us a cool city to come to. Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was equally interested in the map that you showed, how from 1948 to 2002, the population didn't grow, but it said expanded. They have the same number of people, so I thought that was interesting. I've always thinking growth is a good thing. When I see that, I think swelling, and swelling can by an issue or a concern when you have swelling. So it was just an observation, something I probably like to know more about why that map is as it is and how it relates to transportation. Has it stretched our resources? What does that mean? So my question is, you mentioned that in time you're going to create metrics. Do you have a sense, can you give us just the insight of what you think some of these metrics that you will be developing time might be for your department?
That's a great question. And as a side note, I would love to talk about those maps more in detail and how that shift in population does put a strain on resources countywide, when at one time with a more concentrated population, infrastructure and like utilities, supportive infrastructure, utility services were needed across a smaller area. And now, even though we have the same number of people, the same tax base, those services have to be provided across a larger geography. It does put a strain on our capacity, our resources to provide. In terms of metrics, on the infrastructure side, we could look at things like we would want to provide metrics that are showing a balance of both projects built, so physical miles of new infrastructure or rehabilitated infrastructure with enhancements. In terms of number of like new services that are connecting people to jobs, we could look at number of businesses participating in those programs. We could look at the numbers of employees who are using those new services that have been implemented. We could look at the employee retainment of the number of employees, the employee turnover before these services were offered, the employee turnover after these types of services were offered. And in terms of policies, if we were to tweak incentives, for example, that we offer businesses to locate in a connected area, we could look at the number of businesses that chose to locate in connected areas before those incentives were offered, or businesses that located there after those incentives were offered. We'd want to make sure that the metrics that we're using are reflective of the overall goals, again, of connectivity, economic mobility, health, things like that.
Thank you.
Chairman Schwan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have both these maps of the 48 and 02. We only have the one map of the transportation system. Do you have the 48 map that would comply? Because I know that the transportation system that existed way before 48 was much more extensive than this map was actually. The interurban line used to run throughout this county. It ran way out to a lot of this area that is not shown with any service at all on this map. Do you have, at what point did we switch from things like the interurban line that used to cover Cuyahoga County? I'm sure you're familiar with the interurban line.
I don't have those maps on.
Is there a map that shows what our transportation system, because I know my uncles, my aunts, they used to ride all over this county, all the way out to almost to the edge of Geauga County on the interurban line, and there's books on it, so I'm sure you've got those someplace in your transportation. If you have,
I'm sure there are.
Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. I'd be happy to look
Oh,
into
yeah,
it.
it's called the interurban line. It's been around, it was around, and I think that probably what happened is some of those things dropped off because the demand dropped off. But you follow the rapids, and again, the interurban line ran from all the way from downtown all the way out to all the farthest distances around the county. So I would encourage you to do that. If you're going to start looking at that, you ought to, if you're going to compare population and transportation, you should compare them at the same time too, to see what we had in systems out there, because the bus lines used to be much more extensive. The interurban line was much more extensive. Now you indicated you were transportation director for University Circle?
Yes,
So you had a transportation department at University Circle.
we did.
And you were what in the city of Cleveland? What was your title?
I was a project coordinator on the implementation side of infrastructure projects.
And how long were you there?
13 months.
Okay. And was that being done before you got there too, that same concept?
It was.
So why didn't they have a transportation department while you were there, or create one there?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer to that question personally. It's a big lift to create a new department and to create that focus. And last year, Mayor Bibb did designate a senior strategist around transit and mobility to work for the city. And that person coordinates public transit initiatives, multimodal infrastructure projects, but there isn't currently a department at the city.
Okay, and it would seem to make sense that if we're looking at that and we're disagreeing that something is not working with all the systems that are already in place, that we ought to figure out how to do that out of the existing systems out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just get one more and then we'll let you get out of here. Dealing with the 59 communities and some of the issues that come up, I think it's prudent to have a single entity from the county weighing in when the decisions come up. If it's a zoning or a variance or just, and we had the situation when I first got here was, should we expand the sidewalk for Lake Avenue to give access to the gem that we have, the Metro Parks with Edgewater? So do you find yourself believing that's going to be a role that you play in regards to saying, hi, all these entities, this is the county and this is our single position, and hopefully it can add value to a positive decision to help move this forward? Does that make some sense?
Sure. I think for a lot of specific project questions like that, there would always be a number of staff who have worked on that issue or departments that have a role in executing or coordinating that project. Where my role would come into play in something like that would be thinking about how a specific project like that either plays into a larger transportation network, how critical that gap is or that specific project is relative to the system as a whole, or if it's kind of a unique special initiative that's out there. But a number of folks would be working on that an issue like that on the county's end.
And I appreciate that. And just on my Councilwoman Simon, the first time I met her, I went to her office just to say hi, and Mike Foley's sitting with her. So I thought that was a natural fit. And is he excited or is he threatened by you?
I think he's very excited.
Got it.
I think he's excited, and
I just think it's an addition that is going to enhance the reality of an improved transportation. Will make our city and our county more attractive, and hopefully it'll draw businesses here to help be the economic engine component that will do good for us. So, Councilwoman?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a natural fit, and I think we'll see whether transportation should be part of sustainability for sure. But I just see this as being the role of the Planning Commission, what you just described of putting the pieces together. This is what Planning Commission does. This is what they're trained for. This is what they go to school for and they do all day. That's our county Planning Commission, to connect the dots, incentivize businesses, go into, food deserts and provide that. So I don't know about how you're going to enhance that. I trust you will, but certainly not expanding this department is not something that I would really eagerly await, because I think we already have that in place. And I think if want to utilize Planning Commission more, or the executive put new people on, perhaps he wants to steer their agenda, our agenda, that's fine. But, I don't want to duplicate. And I think colleague Schron said the same thing. I don't want to go down that avenue.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. And in these early stages, as we're laying out the plans and priorities, a lot of my work in the first 2 weeks that I've been here has been meeting with people on the Planning Commission, meeting with directors, Mike Foley and his team, Public Works and the team, Development and the team, and understanding how much of the work that's underway does relate to this existing transportation vision. As we build out more subcomponents of those pieces, I would like to come back and continue the dialogue and discuss how this initiative is really additive to the work of the county.
Well,
and our partners.
Did you enjoy your first presentation to Cuyahoga County Council?
I did. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the information.
And I'm just very thankful that you did. And on Councilman Miller's point, and Simon and Jack Schron and our council president, I was going to say see you in 4 months, but I'll see you when you have an update for us, so you keep us in the loop as we work in partnership with you, trying to implement the vision of the executive. So thank you very much. Is there any miscellaneous? Well, thank you everyone for participating, and this meeting is adjourned.